Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge, in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Our kids and grandkids are being conditioned to idolize and even emulate the army of Antichrist. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. That's what we call a tease, where you throw something out there and then you have to unpack it later. But the idea is to hook you into this conversation, which I hope it did. The topic of the conversation will be the topic of a forthcoming conference at which I'm honored to be one of the speakers. Our guest is the organizer of this conference, now in its 6th year. It is called the Sons of God, Giants of Old Conference. It is set for August 3rd and 4th at Fellowship Church in Lubbock, Texas. And we welcome back a good friend of the bunker, Dr. Judd Burton. Judd, welcome.
Thank you, Derek. Glad to be here.
Should point out Judd is a historian and anthropologist, a professor of history at South Texas College, and an author of a book that we recommend, Interview with the Giant, Ethno-Historical Notes on the Nephilim. And it is those characters that I refer to as the army of Antichrist. I'm going to make that argument in a forthcoming book. Actually, the book is done. It is off now to typesetting, and it should be available, if not by the conference, and that probably not going to happen. It's going to be really, really close, but shortly thereafter, if not by the conference, called Last Clash of the Titans. And this builds on something we talked about in our last discussion, Judd, the fact that what we take in our modern world as Greek mythology, which has been repackaged by Hollywood for years and now being sold to our kids as a popular series of young adult fiction novels, but it essentially is just repackaged Canaanite and pagan religion from the time encompassed by the books of the Bible. Certainly,
there's always the universal sort of archetypal element of these myths that deal with the Nephilim and the Watchers and what have you, because they show up in different packaging, as you said, to use your word, to use your phrase. They show up in different packaging in different parts of the world. But if you look at the mythologies of the ancient Near East and the Mediterranean basin, the connective tissue is much clearer. You can see more direct passage of. We're not just talking about ideologies, like in the case of Orientalizing, but the actual literal physical family trees, if you will, of the gods from their origins to other parts of the ancient Mediterranean.
The thing that really astounded me, and I kind of stumbled onto this line of questioning. This wasn't like I went digging into research for my last book, The Great Inception, looking for something that I could establish as a brand, if you will, like, oh, Derek's the guy who talks about the cosmic mountains or whatever. It was just sort of there, and as I started digging into that and realizing, hey, wait a minute, this stuff looks a lot like this other stuff. I mean, the Canaanite rituals that summon the Rephaim. And it surprised me, first of all, and as I started pulling on that thread, it's like, wow, okay, the neighbors of the ancient Israelites knew who the Rephaim were. I wonder how far back that thread goes. And in my next book, I'll make the case, and I'm going to go deeper into that in the follow-up book for 2019 that deals with the Amorites, who were the ancestors of the Canaanites. But it struck me that you could pull on this thread and go back at least to the time of Abraham. And I looked at the etymology of the greatest of the Amorite kings, Hammurabi of Babylon, as evidence that they knew who the Rephaim were. And then pulling in research from peer-reviewed secular academic papers from guys who don't really have a theological dog in the hunt, at least not as far as I can tell. They're just looking at this as a curiosity. Oh, look at this fact. This word is derives from this word, which derives from this word. And suddenly these puzzle pieces started fitting together. So it's not just looking at a surface level, oh, well, Zeus was a storm god and Baal was a storm god, so they must be the same thing. Now, this is deeper when you start digging into the etymology and the sites considered sacred to those gods, and the the history of the festivals associated with some of these gods. In particular, I look at the festivals associated with Kronos, who was the king of the Titans, and you begin to see a very definite historical pattern that traces backwards from Greece across Anatolia, modern Turkey, to Mesopotamia.
Indeed. Well, the material's sort of been hiding in plain sight. You reference the secular academic scholars that have in their own respective fields have done really good work. But as you say, they don't, like we do, they don't have a theological dog in the hunt, and so the puzzle pieces really don't make sense to them. Rather than being able to fit those puzzle pieces together, they're concentrating on the individual puzzle pieces because of their novelty is probably not the right word, but they're a valuable part of the cultural narrative for whatever particular civilization or culture they happen to be looking at.
You've got Hittitologists and Assyriologists, and
right. It gets very diffuse. The number of specializations. In ancient Near Eastern culture or ancient Mediterranean culture, for that matter. But their work is valuable for what we're doing because we can see the connective tissue. Mm-hmm. We can, because of God-given discernment and a background in the biblical worldview and the scriptures. This stuff comes to life for us. It's not just part of some literary tradition or some aesthetic that makes a culture unique. For us, it's intelligence. It's part of the enemy's battle plan, and I think that's one of the things that the conference, I think over the years has been sort of growing to, is trying to cull in, that sort of intelligence and be able to share it with, a larger audience.
The significance of the giants to the modern world, and this is one of the things that I was encouraged to look at when I wrote The Great Inception, because as a history nerd, for me, it's all fascinating, but for most of us, and I get this, for most of us, that's interesting information, but the world is more important than just really a complicated game of Trivial Pursuit. How does this information from 4,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, how does it apply to the world today? How does it apply to our future? How is this going to affect me today? And that's an important question. I've got some thoughts that I'll bring to this particular conference relative to Bible prophecy. For you, Judd, in your research, and your doctoral dissertation, I should point out, is about the site called Banias or Penias, or the Grotto of Pan, more popularly, at the foot of Mount Hermon. Why do you think this stuff is important to deal with today? Why is it relevant?
It's relevant. It's relevant because Jesus told us it was relevant. He couched the general period of the end of days in terms of Noah's world. There's a popular passage in Matthew about as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. To me, that's always been very clear. You never see Jesus, saying anything by accident, as it were. And so I think that's a clear indicator that the details of the pre-flood world are going to be relevant to the time of drawing closer to Christ's return. I think that's pretty evident in the passage, and in many ways we're being conditioned for it. That is to say that the sort of Luciferian side of it that controls a lot of the media and popular entertainment and stuff like that we're bombarded with television programs and literature and movies that repackage this stuff and couch it in different terms. Whether that's in superhero movies or fantasy movies or whatever. It's something that's hiding in plain. The conditioning, in other words, is sort of hiding in plain sight in our popular culture. So there are a number of different elements, a number of different facets by which this is going to impact our modern world, and why people should, why believers in particular should be cognizant of the relevance of this material. In other words, this is not just something that you and I or others in the field are just taking out of context from the Bible and talking about it to make a quick buck.
Mm-hmm.
This is relevant theologically. This is relevant historically. It's relevant culturally, even if it taxes the imagination. We can't censor this stuff out of the Bible so that the narrative is more comfortable for us. It simply is.
Yeah, as our friend Guy Malone has said, the price of admission to this club that we call Christianity is believing that a carpenter in a remote, dusty corner of the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago literally rose from the dead. So why do we think it's supposed to make more sense from there? The thing that blew my mind in researching the forthcoming book is that there appear to be, and I make this case in some depth in the book. Of course, during a presentation, I can only give the outlines, but I think Ezekiel and Isaiah were drawing on the beliefs of their pagan neighbors and saying, okay, this is what they believe, but here's what's going to happen. And they were looking at these venerated spirits who their pagan neighbors believed were ancestors, especially dead royal ancestors. That's how the Rephaim are portrayed in the Bible, too, which is why I believe they were basically saying what our Canaanite and Amorite neighbors believe to be the mighty men of renown are in fact going to comprise a component of, if not the bulk of, the end times army of the great eschatological enemy of God and Israel in the end times. So essentially, I'm going to connect the Rephaim and the Nephilim not only to Greek mythology and the hero cults of the Greeks, but to the War of Gog and Magog, which I believe is the same as the Battle of Armageddon. So that's where I think the relevance comes into play, and I think I can show that these puzzle pieces fit together pretty well.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's all definitely going to be a huge component of. And
it's not
the forces of the enemy.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not talking about literally generating giants in incubation tanks or anything like that. I mean, if the spirits of the Nephilim, which was the belief of the early church, are demons, and that's certainly what the Greeks believed, although they believed the demons were friendly and helpful, then the spirits of the Nephilim are still with us today. The spirits of the giants have never left us. And so we are still contending with them in the form of demons today. So if you've got a demonic or a demonically infused or possessed army serving the Antichrist coming against Israel for the Battle of Armageddon, well, there you go. There's your army of the Nephilim. It doesn't have to be. I think looking at Bible prophecy, and I don't want to get too far afield, and I certainly want to talk a little bit more about what other speakers will bring to the table here, Judd, but I think sometimes when we look at end times prophecy, we tend to get a little too literal or naturalistic in our view. We need to find which human leader is going to be the Antichrist or Gog of Magog. Certainly we see that in certain publications, even coming out of Israel, where the rabbis there, ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox rabbis looking for Gog, are looking at Bashar al-Assad or Recep Tayyip Erdogan or even Vladimir Putin. I think we need to remember that we're dealing with a spiritual enemy here, a supernatural enemy. And yes, there will be physical, accomplices, but I think we need to look at the supernatural realm first and foremost as insofar as we are able with our natural senses. I mean, most of us don't see into that realm, and I certainly not volunteering for that kind of sight because that's frightening and horrifying. I just as soon, Lord, take me and show me the whole picture when it's over. Right. I think that's what Ezekiel and Isaiah and the other prophets were pointing to when we get into that. I think the puzzle pieces fit together. And forgive me for dominating the conversation. I just find this topic just fascinating.
No, I concur. I mean, that's why I say that. We're all working with different parts of the whole in terms of our research, but I think a lot of us are coming to the independent discovery that this seems to be where those passages are pointing to. In a general sense, those are the conclusions that I've been coming to, ever since I got into this. But I'm certainly looking forward to your articulations of that in your next book.
Well, and interestingly, Pastor Dan Crestman and I had a conversation yesterday morning. I talked with him, and Pastor Crestman is the pastor of Fellowship Church, which is hosting the conference August 3rd and 4th, and we came to the same conclusion, that we, independently of one another, our research is leading to the same conclusion, that we're dealing with an enemy that has been with us for a very long time. In fact, as Sharon and I were talking this morning, it occurred to us that we are dealing with an enemy that may have been created specifically by the fallen, by the Watchers who descended on Mount Hermon, not just for the harm that they caused the world and to humanity back in the day with their predations on human society, but perhaps knowing that when their mortal flesh was destroyed, that their spirits would continue on as a plague against humanity until the judgment. They may have been,
I couldn't agree more,
in a sense, a sort of a supernatural bioweapon aimed at humanity.
Right. Yeah, and this also goes back to the last show that we did together. I think that the lines between the supernatural and technology are basically artificial. Mm-hmm. I think the word I used was techno-sorcery. Because, and I like the description that you give it as sort of a bioweapon that was created for multiple uses. They were looking not only in terms of what damage could be done immediately, but longitudinally in the future. I couldn't agree more.
So looking forward to seeing or hearing what Pastor Dan Crestman has to bring to the table. Talk about the other guests who'll be coming to the conference. And again, we're talking about the Sons of God, Giants of Old 6 conference, August 3rd and 4th in Lubbock, Texas. Dr. Gregory Reed.
Greg Reed is he is the director of Youth Fire Ministries, and is a counselor and minister, and has worked in the field of counseling people who've been involved in satanic ritual abuse for literally decades. He and I met probably about 16 or 17 years ago. A friend of mine had attended one of his conferences. He was in probation and parole. And Greg was doing a law enforcement seminar, which he often does. And I read 2 of his books, Nobody's Angel, and which is sort of autobiographical about his own experiences, and also another work, Diary of a Devil Hunter, which is kind of expanded on what he'd been doing for the past few decades. Greg is the real deal. He's if listeners have seen the movie Detestable, Dr. Reed was really the central figure of that film. That was a film that was put out by Jared Cressman and Tom Dunn. And Greg will no doubt be enlightening us on question that we were dealing with a minute ago, which is, how is all this pertinent to us today? How is all of this applicable now? How is this ancient knowledge pertinent to us today? And Greg is going to fill in a lot of those gaps. And for people who really want to get a sense of what that kind of ministry is like, and also what the spirits of those giants have been doing and what they do to people, and how people can be set free from that kind of bondage and oppression. People will glean a lot of valuable information from Greg because of his years of experience in the field and his equally important years of research about these topics. So Greg will be Greg's presentation will be a fascinating one. I think his topic is still kind of up in the air, but it's something that listeners won't want to miss.
Well, again, that's even more, I think, immediate than the talk that I'll give, which is going to deal with end times prophecy and its connection to these venerated dead gods of old. But it's the type of work that Russ Dizdar has been doing, which is dealing with victims of satanic ritual abuse and demonic possession and oppression. Of course, that's where the rubber meets the road in the spiritual war, is
exactly
dealing with people who are contending with these spirits right now. For them, this war is very real and very immediate. And again, if the theory is correct that the origin of the spirits are these miscegenated giants created by the Nephilim, by the Watchers rather, then we are dealing still with the fallout of that sin that began on the summit of Mount Hermon. So again, that is a very important aspect of why this particular topic, the creation of the giants in Genesis 6, is relevant today. You've got another speaker on the roster here who is somebody I've been interested in meeting for quite some time, and that's Joe Taylor. What is he going to bring to the table?
Joe Taylor is without a doubt one of the most fascinating people I've ever A, met, or B, worked with. Joe is a veteran field paleontologist and archaeologist. He's also the curator of the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum in Crosbyton, Texas, which is just down the road from Lubbock. Joe is also a master bone caster, and he's done work for museums all over the country. One of Joe's pictures is kind of iconic in the field of giantology, and that's the one where he's standing next to this cast of not a direct cast. It's made from description, but it's this rendering of a 3-foot-long femur. And it's, again, it's one of those iconic images, that if you Google Joe's name, that image is going to come up. But he is, he was actually instrumental in getting the first Sons of God, Giants of Old conference off the ground. This was back in 2011, the summer of 2011, where we had, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 people that showed up to the first round. But he's a fascinating guy, even outside of his work in creation, paleontology, and archaeology. He's also an accomplished artist, and back in the day, he did album covers for some very notable acts, like James Taylor and some of the up-and-coming Christian artists like Larry Norman. And seems like there were, some of the 1970s kind of easy listening pop rock groups
Mm-hmm.
that he did a lot of album covers for. You might be surprised at how many he's done. He's lived a really storied life. He's a godly guy, and he's got a sharp mind, and he's going to be talking about some new paleontological finds and I want to say Mothman. I think there have been some Mothman sightings around the Lubbock area over the past few years.
Really?
Involving some, these entities chasing people down. So I cannot wait to hear his new findings on that. So, a lot of researchers in the field have come to the conclusion that Mothman is demonic. That's a thesis that I agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, here's another example of a facet of this that is immediately relevant because it's stuff that's happening in our own time, events that are happening in our own time.
So an interesting mix.
People will enjoy not only Joe's presentation, but Joe also brings a lot of show and tell to his table. So he'll have all kinds of dinosaur bones and human fossil remains, and Joe's table is always a lot of fun. So.
Well, it's going to be a little more interesting, I think, than mine. Mine was pretty boring, a few books and a couple of DVDs, but
yeah, but it's got you behind the table, David.
I think that's only of interest to my wife. Anyway, what are you going to talk about? What have you been working on, brother?
Well, most of it is an extension of our last conversation, trying to articulate a science of giantology,
mm-hmm.
and put a mainly because we just sort of, all of us in the field just sort of, we just charge forward with our research. And, I do the same thing. And over the last couple of years, I think, it's probably going to do us a service in the long run to be able to put all this into some sort of structure,
mm-hmm.
some sort of, tenets of a disciplinary field. And so those are some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. The importance of things like, parameters of the field and taxonomy. A lot of the things that we talked about in the last show.
Trying to encourage a certain sense of rigor, academic rigor.
Yeah, right. Again, not to the point of peripheralizing the theological elements, which you can't really strip from this particularly.
No, it's central to it.
Biblical giantology,
right.
But those elements of rigor, help to give us focus.
Right.
I think that. I mean, we're all. I'm guilty of it. I know sometimes I chase rabbits in my own, my research, and sometimes it ends up in a book. I'm like, what was I thinking? And you say that it was kind of out peripheral to the whole discussion. And so those, that's why disciplines have rigor. That's why they have these tenets within them. And I think giantology needs the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you because it's easy.
No, go ahead.
It's easy enough to be considered chasing the fringe anyway, and that's why I asked the question up front. Why is this relevant today? Because amongst most Christians, and acknowledging that most Christians don't even believe that the Holy Spirit is real or that Satan is real. When you start with that,
right.
Most Christians are going to look at guys like you and me and say, "Well, these guys are Fruit Loops."
Right. Right, and that's. I think one of the epiphenomena of our presentations and our research and the books and articles and things that we churn out is that we're pointing out of all this, in addition to getting people familiar with this, we're also getting people to look it up for themselves in the Scripture. And that is crucial because biblical literacy has just gone down the tube.
Yeah.
Over the years, and that's going to result in, if people are genuine about it, if they're letting the Holy Spirit guide them, that's going to result in wisdom and knowledge imparted to them beyond what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hopeful, in that respect, that the people that actually grab onto this and take it seriously, and go look up this stuff for themselves, go look at these passages, that's going to lead to, going into other areas of biblical studies, and will just, enrich them, and edify them in other areas beyond, the Watchers and the Giants and demons.
And in a very practical sense, it begins to make sense of some of the difficult to understand sections of the Bible, like in the Old Testament where God says these people are to be utterly destroyed, or they're dedicated or devoted to destruction. If you come in with a biblical, with no understanding of what was going on supernaturally back then, and why there were certain groups of people that were so totally sold out to these fallen Elohim, these rebellious sons of God, that God said there is no salvation for these people, and we have to trust that in His infinite mercy, because as we read today in our study in Ezekiel 33, that God says He takes no pleasure in the destruction of the wicked, but He is just. So we have to trust that in His infinite mercy and judgment that, there's not even one amongst this group of people, like in Sodom, Lot and his family can get out, but everyone else there they're done. They're toast. There was a reason that these groups of people were devoted to destruction. It's not just that they were, that God was being capricious and genocidal. There were some spiritual, supernatural reasons that they had to be eliminated. And you don't really understand that unless you understand the deeper context of what was going on in the rebellion in the spirit realm, and how ultimately wicked, how that was manifest in the physical realm. I mean, the things that you read in the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and parents, don't read some of those sections out loud in front of your children. Things that God was telling the Israelites not to do weren't things that God was inventing just to create rules to put limits on behavior. These are things that the Canaanites, and God says so in Moses, because these are the things that the Canaanites are doing that I'm driving out before you. Really perverse, debauched things that, in a family program you don't want to discuss, but that's the kind of stuff that they were being encouraged to do by these fallen rebel angels. Today, this morning, I was footnoting. Well, not footnoting. I was flagging papers for later review to possibly work on a future book on human sacrifice in the ancient world. It was all over the ancient Mediterranean, and most of it, ground zero appears to be the Levant, certainly originating with the Amorites and the Canaanites, but the Phoenicians spread it throughout the Mediterranean. There's a reason God was saying, these people have to go. The shedding of human blood was absolutely forbidden, and not only were these people engaging in it in anger. Okay, you can understand if a guy gets angry at a neighbor or wants to take his stuff, and the guy resists. Okay, you can see that resulting in a fatal confrontation. But they were sacrificing and slaughtering children. There's an article that was, Biblical Archaeology Review or something like that, just within the last day or so, about a site in southern Turkey now, dating back to the end of the Uruk expansion period. We're talking about 3000 BC, the end of Nimrod's kingdom, or post-Babel, in other words, where a group of children apparently were sacrificed and buried in a tomb as retainers for the person who died. So,
that's exactly what I was about to say. I don't mean to interrupt you, but retainer sacrifice, even, in the early phases of the Bronze Age.
Well, sure, yeah, that goes back to
about Egypt,
and Egypt,
and then
yes.
Thousands of years later, during the Exodus period, there's that passage, which we've all sort of skipped over, where God says, "Tonight I have defeated the God of Egypt."
Right, and I've executed judgments on the gods of Egypt, right. And, 100 years ago, the famous British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley excavated what he called the royal tombs of Ur, and found all these fabulous golden and lapis lazuli artifacts and lyres and headdresses and jewelry and things like that. And there was a tomb from a woman whose name they found from the inscription was named Puabi. And there were like 60 retainers buried with her. And Woolley painted this sort of idyllic picture where they drank a soporific and just drifted off to sleep, where they could serve their mistress in the afterlife. Except that a few years ago, a team from the University of Pennsylvania exhumed, or rather got some of those skeletons out of storage and checked and found they'd been bashed in the back of a head with an axe.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is my suspicion, both as a believer and an archaeologist, is that we're going to find more and more evidence that whatever kind of
right. Well,
particularly retainer sacrifices that we thought before were these docile sorts of you drink this potion and you just die in your sleep or whatever. We're going to find that there's not only violence at work, but ritual violence.
Exactly. And there are other stories that have come out recently for people who've been paying attention. A site in Peru where they found like 40, and they said, well, this is the largest sacrificial site ever discovered. Well, yeah, except for the Tophet at Carthage, which had something like 25,000 infant burials and urns after they'd been burned to the god Baal Haman. And the Tophet, they've not found the Tophet at Jerusalem in the Valley of Gehenna yet, but Tophets found elsewhere in Sicily, North Africa, Sardinia, sites with ritual sacrifice in ancient Mesopotamia, again, the Peru, and then a discovery of, they discovered the Wall of Skulls that the Mexica, a branch of the Aztec Indians, had set up at their temple in the center of what is now Mexico City.
They were the Mexica. They were the Aztecs.
Okay, all right. And the conquistadors had written about it and said that there may be as many as 150,000, 130,000 skulls in that wall. And archaeologists said, the conquistadors were exaggerating. And now they found the Wall of Skulls. So look, I don't care how you try to paint this. This stuff is all evil. And it's supernaturally driven. There is no natural... Science Magazine, this blew my mind, the way they depicted the story, and this was just published last week. They saw these skulls as the seeds of regeneration, like the first fruits of a new flower. I'm like, what? The first fruits of spring? First flowers of spring was how they put it up. These skulls were like the first flowers of spring to them. What are you talking about?
Well, yeah, I know, and that's been the rationale of the sciences and humanities in dealing with these sorts of finds, is to write it off as, well, we don't understand this because this was simply their culture. This is how they thought. So that gives them a get out of jail free card. A cultural get out of jail free card. Somehow,
poor simple savages in the 16th century.
All of this violence. All of this bloodshed, makes sense in their worldview. So we're just going to write it off. Yeah. I've been reading this stuff since I was, an undergraduate. And it's always made me. At first, it just made me scratch my head, and then it just nauseated me because you really have to work at not getting desensitized to reading this, and remember that they, like you say, they don't have a theological dog in this hunt.
Right.
So their findings are significant, but this rationalizing of the taking of human life on this scale and in this manner as simply a part of their worldview and religious beliefs, just.
Well, and bringing this back full circle to the Watchers and their creation of the Nephilim, and I speculate on this, and I'd like your comment. Is it possible that the Watchers, who, if we identify them as the Titans of Greek mythology, because like the Watchers, who were, according to Peter and Jude, confined in chains in gloomy darkness until the judgment, the Titans of Greek mythology, likewise, with the exception of a couple notable notables like Hecate and Atlas, I guess, who were left out. Oceanus were also left out. One of the Titans who wasn't sent to the abyss, to Tartarus. But having watched their children, the Nephilim, destroyed by God in the flood, presumably, is it possible that they still wield some influence on the earth today and that they have inspired humanity for thousands of years to take the lives of our own children and each other as a sort of revenge against our Creator?
I think so. I believe so. And this is a conversation I've had with a number of researchers. I think so. I think that, and this may also be something that explains the second incursion after the flood, I sort of came to this through my dissertation research. I got to tell you, man, God was really working on me in ways that I didn't even know while I was conducting that research. But you know, the Grotto of Pan is the central shrine at Paneas, and it's, well, you guys saw it when you went on your tour.
Oh, I got to do a little preaching in front of it, brother.
Yeah, I know, man. I wish I could have been there with you guys. I texted Mike that morning, and I actually invited him to the conference. He said he had another engagement, but he said that he wished that I was there. And I said nobody wishes it more than me. It would have been great to be with you guys there. But anyway,
next May, brother. Next May.
Next May. I'm putting it on my calendar, man. You bet. Tell you, caves became a kind of sidebar for me because I wanted to. I was curious as to why the Greeks came to the conclusion that the best shrines for Pan were to be these natural features, you know, these auspicious caves or whatever, and they wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't really make them that ornate. You know, there might be some votive shrines or whatever inside and some statues or whatever, but they favored these caves. And caves, I'm sure as you come across in your research, caves in the ancient world represented openings to the underworld.
Right.
And I began to wonder if, because there's certainly a host of other deities and a myriad of pantheons that are also associated with caves. And I began to wonder if the Titans, or whatever appellation you want to give them, the Titans in Greek mythology, watchers or whatever, were imprisoned in the underworld. Would it be possible if, since there would ostensibly be ceremonies conducted to gods that were revered in caves, would it be possible that those rites were communications with the watchers, the Titans? And that was the influence that they were exerting on the rest of the world. And if those rites were sexual, and they certainly did have sexual rites in the religion of Pan, could this have birthed a second generation, you know, that second incursion of giants? Could this have been one of the means that actually happened? And secondarily to that, could that be the means whereby those underworld deities, those chthonic deities, if you will, the Titans, be communicating with the rest of the world? We already know that even those second generation gods, if you're using the classical lens to look at things, that many of them were associated with caves. Zeus himself was raised in a cave on Mount Crete, on the island of Crete. This association with these ancient deities in caves, it's kind of a thesis that I'm working out to be included in another book. Could this have been the linkage, you know, that influence from the underworld, the way that a possible manner in which they could be manipulating, you know, people over different generations, and exacting the kind of violence and ideologies that we've been talking about today?
Well, that's entirely possible, and certainly there's something about that particular region around the Grotto of Pan And I dig into that in my my forthcoming book. Of course, Mike Heiser's written about that too in The Unseen Realm and Reversing Hermon especially. There was something about that region in particular that suggests a connection to the underworld that was known to the world, the ancient world, as far back at least as the time of Abraham, where the old Babylonian copy of the Epic of Gilgamesh placed the secret dwelling or the secret abode of the Anunnaki, who by that time had sort of been demoted from the chief gods of Sumer to the judges of the netherworld, around Lebanon and Hermon. So, there was something about that realm. Certainly the Amorites, the Canaanites of the time of the judges, from the texts that have been discovered, believed that there was a god there called Rapayu, the king of eternity, who ruled from the same cities as Og of Bashan. So that area around the Golan Heights and at the foot of Mount Hermon had some significant connection to the netherworld. And of course, one of the chief features there was the Grotto of Pan, which, interestingly enough, was believed to be one of the sources of the abyss, the deep, the subsurface deep or suboceanic, one of the fountains of the deep. That was the word I was struggling to find, or the phrase I was struggling to find. One of the fountains of the deep that erupted in the days of Noah, which would make Mount Hermon the source of the double deep, because you had the subterranean deep meeting at the peak of Hermon with the atmospheric deep, the oceans above, from whence the rains came. So yeah, there are a lot of connections, spiritual connections and theological connections with Hermon and the region around it that are significant, and clearly were known to the apostles, the prophets, and to Jesus himself, who chose the area right in front of the cave to ask Peter that question, "Who do you say I am?" And then, of course, climbing the mountain for the transfiguration. So, and it remained, and even to this day, it remains an auspicious sort of place. Just by way of example, during the Crusades, not just any Crusaders and not just any Islamic army, but the Templars and the Assassins fought over Bonnie. Really?
Uh-huh.
And by the way, I should give you credit, because it was your interview with Dr. Michael Bennett, years ago, about your dissertation. That was the first time I'd ever heard about the significance of Banias, the Grotto of Pan, and of course Mount Hermon with the Transfiguration. I was like, my jaw dropped. Like, what? So that was when I first contacted you to find out more, and kind of led down this path of inquiry that's brought us to today. So,
well, I'm on. I'm happy to set you down that path.
Well, you're just picked up on this a lot sooner than most of the rest of us, so I'm happy to direct some attention your way, because it's warranted. Let's before we because we could go on for hours on this topic. I know we both find this fascinating, but in the interest of keeping this to a manageable length for listeners, let's pause here, tell people how to attend the conference, and then promise them the rest of the story when they get to Lubbock, Texas in August.
Is that in Paul Harvey fashion?
Yes. The rest of the story.
You get the rest of the story at the conference. Well, people can learn more about it a number of ways. There's a Facebook page. You can just Google Sons of God, Giants of Old 6 conference. Probably the easier way would be to just go to the main conference page, which is on my website, burtonbeyond.com. There's a link at the top of the main page, and you can just click on there, and it has some information about the conference and the speakers. And people can do one of two things in terms of tickets. You can buy them in advance through PayPal, but we'll also have tickets at the door. So whichever you prefer. The tickets are $5, and it's for both days of the conference. And the first day, there'll be a few hours in the afternoon where we do a kind of meet the speakers and Q&A, and people can network and talk. And then the main speaking sessions will be on Saturday, all day Saturday, and it's going to be a lot of fun. This could potentially be the biggest one that we've had. But if you're in the area or you can make the trip, we would love to have you. You're going to get some good teaching and meet some really good people.
And the Q&A session, the meet and greet, begins at 4 o'clock on Friday, August 3rd.
Friday.
Yeah,
that's right.
On Friday, August 3rd, and then Saturday, August 4th. The sessions begin at 8:30 in the morning. Doors will open at 8 a.m. on August 4th. So Friday afternoon, if you're there by 4 o'clock, you get in and can have an opportunity to meet and talk with folks. This will be more of an opportunity to meet speakers personally than at some other conferences. I mean, there are other conferences that are on our schedule for this year where, for example, the Branson conference last year, there were 3,000 people. The Oklahoma conference we were at last year was almost as big, on the high side of 2,000 people. And it's a little difficult when there are that many people to get any time to really get some face-to-face time with the speakers and the authors and the researchers. So with 5 speakers and a crowd of maybe 100 or so, you've got a better opportunity, I think, of getting into some conversations. So again, August 3rd and 4th, Friday afternoon, a meet and greet. The sessions will be all day Saturday, and registration is only, $5?
That's it.
I thought that was a typo. No, it's
no typo.
This is very affordable. So your cost, essentially, if you're coming from outside the area, your costs are basically just transportation and meals while you're there. And this is a real blessing. And I, for one, really looking forward to it because, again, this material very top of mind for me right now since I just completed the final edits on the manuscript on Friday of this week. So just had gone through it again and looking forward to sharing the results of the research. But looking forward to meeting you face-to-face. We've been talking for a long time. We have not yet had the opportunity to meet in person, so I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. I was thinking it's been 9 years that we've been talking.
Yeah, it has. There was one conference we thought we were going to attend, and then our schedule changed, and we weren't able to make it, and so that kind of put the kibosh on that. But looking forward to it. So again, there'll be links in the show notes at vftb.net, Spreaker.com. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, it'll be in the notes right below this video to Judd's website, burtonbeyond.com, and I'll put a link directly to the page for the Sons of God, Giants of Old 6 conference. Again, the date's August 3rd and 4th, 2018. Lubbock, Texas, Fellowship Church, Pastor Dan Crestman. His church is graciously hosting the conference, and looking forward to what he, Dr. Gregory Reed, and Joe Taylor bring to the conference as well. Dr. Judd Burton, our guest and the author of Interview with the Giant and the Nephilim Dossier, and bringing more to this conference, and we certainly hope we can see you there. Judd, always in education, as always. We could continue this for a long time, but again, to try to keep this manageable for our listeners, we'll cut it here, and we'll pick this up hopefully over dinner in Lubbock.
So you're saying that people have jobs and other stuff to do, basically, is what you're saying.
That's it.
Okay. We'll see you in Lubbock.
Again, check the notes below for the website, the link at Judd Burton's website for the Sons of God, Giants of Old conference. Again, just $5 to register August 3rd and 4th if you're anywhere in the vicinity or can get to Lubbock, Texas, and you have no excuse. They do have an international airport there. Hope to see you there. That day is going to be a lot of fun. August 3rd and 4th. Friday afternoon meet and greet. Saturday all day presentations. And again, a bit more intimate, I guess is the word I'm looking for, at Fellowship Church. A bit more of an intimate setting than many of the conferences we'll attend. And there are advantages to both. For example, we're hoping for a large turnout at the Hear the Watchman conference coming to Long Island, August 9th through 12th. That's at the Hyatt Regency, Long Island. But of course, the Hyatt Regency is equipped to accommodate a larger group than Fellowship Church, Lubbock, Texas. So we will be there along with Rabbi Zev Parat, Pastor Carl Gallups, L.A. Marzulli, Dr. Michael Lake, Pastor Casper McLeod, Pastor Mike Spalding, Pastor Paul Begley, Henry Groover, and others. Michael Boldea will be there, and we hope we can see you there as well. This will be a wonderful 3-day gathering, the 9th through the 11th for the conference, and then on the 12th, the Montauk Mystery Tour, which is an optional add-on where you can basically take a day trip, visit the site that inspired the Netflix series Stranger Things. Always interesting if you're of a conspiratorial mind like us. For information on that, hearthewatchmen.com, hearthewatchmen.com. Don't delay on that. They would like to get this filled up as soon as possible. And you can save $20 on the registration with the promo code Gilbert20. That's Gilbert20. That promo code Gilbert20 will also get you 20% off the video stream. And the video stream includes an added bonus this time if you sign up for the live video stream for the Hear the Watchman conference. Well, semi-live. What they do is they record it, upload it to Vimeo, and then you can download it from Vimeo directly. That way, the stream doesn't get interrupted by wonky hotel Wi-Fi. So it's a better, more secure way of doing it than from some conferences, more cost-effective way as well. But if you sign up for the video package for the Hear the Watchman Conference Long Island, you'll also get access to the presentations from the March conference in Dallas on demand. So it's like getting 2 conferences for the price of one, and you can get 20% off the video streaming at hearthewatchmen.com with the promo code Gilbert20. Now, we've talked about transhumanism quite a bit, both on this program, Sharon and I on PID Radio. We've been talking about this at conferences since 2011. Participated in the award-winning documentary Inhuman, the movie. And Sharon will be one of the featured speakers at the forthcoming conference, Transhumanism and the Hybrid Age. That's from True Legends, coming to Branson September 14th through the 16th. This one is almost completely sold out. A 3,000-seat theater down to just a few hundred seats left. And when it's sold out, it's done because the fire marshal in Branson won't allow more people in there for safety's sake. And that's a good thing. So if you're planning to go or you want to go, register soon. Gen6.com, GENSIX.com, or you can sign up for the video stream. This is live video stream from True Legends. Gen6.com is the place to go for that, and they're also offering this deal where if you sign up for the live video stream for this conference in September, you get access to last year's presentations on demand. The video from last year's presentations on demand when you sign up for the video stream for this year's conference. Information and registration at gen6.com. That's GENSIX.com. And then in October, a place I've wanted to visit for a long time. I've done a little bit of reading about the Civil War. I wouldn't call myself a Civil War buff, but interested in that period of history. We've got a battlefield less than an hour from where I sit right now here in Missouri, believe it or not. A bunch of fighting took place here in Missouri. Didn't realize that until not long ago, which shows what I'm saying is that I'm not an expert on the Civil War, but Gettysburg's certainly one of the most famous battles of the Civil War, if not one that turned the tide. And that is the site of the East Coast Prophecy Conference, October 18th through the 20th at the Wyndham Gettysburg. Tom Horn, one of the featured speakers. I will be speaking. Joe Horn as well. Stephen Strang, the author of God and Donald Trump, and the publisher of Charisma Magazine, Dr. Larry Spargimino, Dr. Bob Glaze, and others, featured speakers there. Again, this is presented by Dr. Glaze and Dr. Spargimino of Southwest Radio Ministries. So for information and registration there, Southwest Radio Church's website, swrc.com. That's swrc.com for the East Coast Prophecy Conference, October 18th through the 20th in Gettysburg. Before I go, I want to pass along a prayer request. A friend of ours who's been in ministry for a long time, always an interesting character, and not everybody agrees with him on everything, but he is a gentle soul and one who we dearly love as a friend, going through a time of trial right now, diagnosed with, I won't say, but just it's serious. He's hospitalized at the moment. I'm talking about Doc Marquis. He doesn't appear to be in any pain, but he's been dealing with memory issues because of a tumor in his brain. And again, not knowing the extent or the specific diagnosis, I'm not going to comment on that, except to note that friends are asking for prayer for Doc Marquis. Of course, the good news is that he knows the Lord. That's not a way to just diminish any of the worry that his friends and family have for him. It's never easy watching somebody you like or love go through a time of testing and trial like this, especially when it's physical in nature. But we are asking for prayer for our friend Doc Marquis. So if you could just remember when you come before the Lord with your petitions, just to toss in a word or two for Joseph Doc Marquis in his hour of need, and we certainly appreciate that. Please remember that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.